Chalk this one down as another long time coming. I feel like we've all been in that phase where we looked back on films and TV shows that came out when we were younger and seeing how well they've held up for us as adults. It's something I find very fascinating personally, especially speaking as a Gen Z person. There are plenty of films I could say were just as good as they were back then, and even some I end up loving even more as an adult than I ever did as a kid, even putting nostalgia aside. But there's also those that have seemed to have gotten worse looking back on it. Sometimes they're well known, either good or bad, and sometimes it could be a bit of an oddball one. Case in point, Happy Feet was a film I used to love a lot as a kid. I saw it in theaters even if I don't remember the experience itself. Rather, most of my memories come from a cam copy of the film I had on DVD that looks something like this. Yeah, I can't believe I found this image rolling around on the internet. And looking back on it, I could say it mostly held up as good as it did before. Key word here being mostly. It does have its issues, I'll admit, and I will address them when we get to that. But there are still plenty of aspects I do like about this film, and I could definitely see why it was a critical success and garnered an Oscar nomination. And because of that, I thought everyone agreed that this was a good movie. That is, until I came across this.
Happy Feet is astonishingly awful.
Yeah, correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like this film has a bit of a more mixed reception with audiences. There are those who still say it's a good movie, some that say it's in the middle, but then you have those like James here who says the film was terrible. Back then, when I was still the biased man-child I was, just a perk of being on the spectrum, I recall being livid about the slander he gave to that movie. But looking back, I can't really get that mad over someone else's opinion if I disagree. I mean, two minds don't think the same, yada yada yada. But I considered making a video defending this film for a while now. But given how I was still learning the ropes of reviews, on top of personal events like college and moving away, I really never got around to it until now. And that was all before he made this statement.
And like, I guess we could do that thing if you really want to make a video talking about why you love Happy Feet.
Yeah, I know it's been over a year since he made that video, but better late than never, I guess. But that's enough beating around the bush. Let's take a look at what this film has to offer, talk about what I like and what I don't like about it, and why I still consider it an underrated movie. So the film opens during the mating season in Emperor Land. Right out of the gate, I think this opening does a solid job establishing how this world works from their perspective. On the surface, it looks like one of those jukebox musical openings, which I'll get to when we get to that section. But as we're introduced to Norma Jean and Memphis, we learn about how the Emperor Penguins live and interact through song, treating it as almost a religious following with how finding their love song is like their birthright, which is true as we learn later on in the opening. I know it's probably early to bring up comparisons, but James makes the argument that the film doesn't establish its religious angle well, making it feel more out of left field. Bringing up the scene that follows that, where the males incubate their eggs during the blistering cold and how it can be interpreted as a birthing ritual more than an act of religion. But isn't a ritual one of the many key factors of anyone's religion? Now, I'm speaking as someone who's agnostic and doesn't know that much about religion, but I feel like I do understand the base of it. Rituals are meant to show someone's dedication to those they look up to, in this case, an all-powerful being. And when you consider this is something the Emperor Penguins have been doing with each generation, you can connect the pieces together and understand the parallels. In fact, we actually do see a glimpse of who they see as their God, which is something James neglected to mention in both his discussions of the film. They even take it a step further with foreshadowing the conflict by having Memphis act differently from the other penguins, leading to him accidentally dropping his egg. It's after that when he starts to fall in line with the others. It's a nice little bit of detail I appreciate and makes it all come together when we get to that point. I don't see it as out of nowhere and think it was better established than he made it out to be. I'd even say it meshes surprisingly well with the story of Mumble trying to fit into society despite being born different. And considering what's been going up with individuality today, I think it sticks out a lot more today than it would have in 2006. Anyways, after all that, time passes and the eggs start to hatch. We're then introduced to our protagonist, Mumble Happy Feet. And no, I'm not joking, that is his full name.
You, Mumble Happy Feet, I'm gonna be telling your story, Happy Feet.
Listen.
We're shown his knack for expressing himself through dancing and his inability to sing. I'll admit, it does go on for a bit, but they throw in some decent comedy to supplement it. Like, I can watch the whole bit with Mrs. Astrakhan and I would never get tired of it.
Now, let it out. Be spontaneous! What is that?
I'm being spontaneous.
With the failed attempts to get Mumble to sing, he eventually goes out to dance in solitude. It's here where we establish another aspect of the film, the humans. Mumble is later surrounded by a bunch of skuas and he notices the leader has a tag. So he proceeds to monologue about his experience with the humans, and I won't lie, this aspect wasn't handled that well, but I'm gonna save that part for later. So overall, the beginning does a good job establishing its setting and conflict. It does a good job introducing some of its characters, the world and environment they live in, and some of the plot elements that'll come into play as the film progresses. I think the religious angle was handled well, and they managed to sneak in some good comedic moments here and there. It's probably no wonder why this beginning is engraved into my memory. We cut to a couple years later when Mumble and the others are entering adulthood. Or in Mumble's case, entering close to adulthood. You can tell everyone's perception of him has not improved over time, with the only others really showing support for him being his mother, and his father, albeit a bit half-assed.
Yeah.
And his childhood friend Gloria. He tries to hit it off with her by giving her a fish and even taking on skuas to do it. I like how the film shows us his dedication towards Gloria, further establishing the relationship they have. But at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter since everyone else reprimes him for his terrible singing. Ouch. So after leaving them and watching from a distance, he wakes up to find... I guess they weren't planning on holding the kid's hands for that long. Mumble manages to barely escape with his tail bitten in half, and he comes across a group of Dedele penguins known as the Amigos. Subtle. They take a liking to him for his special talent in dancing, which is nice to see. With how others treated him for his lack of singing and skill in dancing, it's pleasing to see someone actually take an appreciation for it even if they are different penguins. Considering there are people who respond differently to someone's interest or talent, it's nice to establish both the positives and negatives of one's individuality. But this moment of bonding is cut off when Mumble comes across an excavator crashing down into the ocean. Reminding him of the last time he came across something like this, he connects back to these mystic beings, even telling the Amigos about digging deeper into this mystery. Their solution is to seek wisdom from someone named Lovelace, who claims to have interacted with these mystic beings. I like how Lovelace presents his wisdom as spiritual contact with the mystic beings, but also showing a bit of an ego in not even looking back, hinting there is something fishy about his status.
Please ask the mystic beings, will I ever be as rich as you?
In your dreams, Gene. Next.
Gracias.
Anyways, through asking a bunch of questions, Lovelace takes offense to how he's being questioned about his gift from the humans and eventually shuts Mumble and the others out. With him now in another dead end, it shifts to Mumble heading back home for the mating season, and upon learning about how they find their love, the Amigos respond with...
You're kidding, right?
further highlighting their different views of their lifestyle. But despite seeing it as ludicrous, they still consider helping him win the heart of his true love. They're upbright about his inability to sing, but I appreciate how they still don't see it as a bad thing and still want to help him in his time of need. Afterwards, we cut back to Emperorland for mating season, replicating the same feel and tone as the beginning. However, Gloria catches on to how strange it is that Mumble can all of a sudden sing. Spoilers, he still hasn't. Turns out he was lip-syncing with Ramon's singing, and this is where Gloria truly feels hurt by Mumble's actions. Throughout the film, she never looked down on him in spite of his quirks. At worst, she lightly asked him to cool it down at the graduation celebration. Other than that, she reprimed her classmates for laughing at his inability to sing when they were kids, and she genuinely felt bad for him when they chastised him again at the same celebration. But this is where her feeling offended is warranted, since that is kinda low in hindsight. So the amigos suggest he use the next best option: dancing. This leads into probably my favorite scene in the movie, Mumble proceeding to express his feelings to Gloria through his happy feet, and even encouraging her to sing along to it. Given the way singing and dancing mesh together, seeing them interweave these two different talents to create a new harmony is pleasing to watch.
Baby, so slowly into hearts of those who need more than they get. Daylight deals a bad hand to a penguin that has laid too many bets.
But the religious subplot is brought back as everyone is dancing with Mumble, and the elders put a stop to it under the belief that breaking the status quo is offensive towards the Great Gwen, and thus leads to the scarcity of fish. And yeah, this is one of the things James brought up that I do agree was an oversight. And that's how they neglect the show don't tell moniker with the fish shortage. There's really only tiny bits of evidence showing the lack of fish, but it requires scraping the very bottom of the barrel to find it. And the closest thing I can think of was the moments with the skuas, given how they're observing them afar, snatching Mumble's fish for Gloria, or even commenting on the lack of fish.
The flipperboids, that's you, eat the fish. Yeah. The flying boys, that's me, eat the flipperboid and the fish. And lately, there ain't a lot of fish.
Oh, would you like to hear our specials? How about some fish? There's no fish. How about some penguin? There's no penguin. What are we gonna...
But again, you have to pay real close attention in order to find it. And even then, that's still more telling than it is showing. And that's a huge problem, because it is a driving factor that gives the others a reason to shame Mumble for being different. Actually, on that note, there was something I learned while writing this. Apparently, there was a bigger emphasis on the fish shortage, with the females dying after returning from their hunt and the Mumble discovering the males going crazy due to the famine, which would tie to the overzealous nature of the elders' religion. I definitely have more to say about what was cut from the film, but I'm gonna save that for later. Still, you could look at the whole situation as a precautionary act of repentance, as they order Mumble to fall in line or leave. But he's not having it and starts to trace the lack of fish back to the humans, which is scoffed at by everyone, thinking it's connected to the way he thinks differently. Which makes sense. So after leaving, Mumble decides to look deeper into the humans, first seeking answers from Lovelace. Except...
Lovelace, you okay?
Oh, he's possessed. Oh, no. It's a seizure. It's a seizure.
turns out his talisman has begun to suffocate him. Also, he reveals how he lied about the whole interacting with mystic beings and that he came across this by accident. But he does know the way to where he got it and that it could lead to answers behind the whole ordeal. The rest of this plays out as he expected. Gloria follows him, but he tries to shoo her away, fearing she'd be throwing her life away, even if it means insulting her. I'll give it he probably doesn't entirely mean it, but again, it's a bit much. Eventually, after going through seals, storms, and killer whales, they finally come across a barge sailing through the ice. Once they reach what looks to be an end of their path, Mumble decides to continue forward and follow the barge to civilization. This is where we get into the climax of the film, and yeah, it's kind of weak. It's cool to see an aquarium exhibit and even see one of the uses of fish from humans. But it also raises some questions that are left unanswered, and I mean ones that matter to the plot. Mumble manages to appeal to the crowd through dancing, and then it later cuts to him returning home? Like, how did he even do that? Did he escape? Was he released? I don't know. It's a weird oversight, and I feel like a simple explanation wouldn't hinder the film in any way. But the fact of the matter is, Mumble returns to Emperor Land to explain how he came in contact with the humans and even picked up a little trinket from them.
It's a tracking device!
I'm guessing Mumble was released from captivity, but why have a tracker on him on top of that? Did the people think there are other dancing penguins? It's kind of confusing, especially since it's integral to the climax. Since now Mumble is leading the humans to the Emperor Land, all the penguins have to start dancing once the humans arrive. Okay, what exactly is that gonna accomplish? Oh, simple. The entire world will see these dancing penguins and it becomes such a big deal to everyone that they start protesting and the governments proceed to put a stop to all fishing exports in Antarctica. Not some, not most, all. Okay, that's just a cop-out. It's hard to believe that authorities have the right to ban all fishing for anybody, let alone some or for penguins. I get this is a family film and all that, but even as a kid, I feel that would be cheap. In fact, that's the best way to sum up the final act. It's an underwhelming conclusion that raises a bunch of questions, and none of them are addressed because family film. I wouldn't say it outright ruins the film, at least for me. I mean, there's one thing they did well, more on that later, but I do have to dock a lot of points for this. That said, I think the story is still better than I remember. Sure, it does flip-flop between 3 different beats with Mumble's condition, the religious angle, and the mystic beings, but the former 2 were well established and kept my attention even bartering the climax. But once you dissect the whole human aspect, it starts to become baffling. The funny thing is, however, the film we've gotten was much different than what was originally conceived. I already mentioned how the Fan-Men had a more established and prominent feel to it, but there's also aspects like how there was originally going to be aliens during the ending, and how it was going to be geared way more towards an older audience, with darker themes and stronger language. Sort of an in-between of Golden Age Disney and Watership Down. Their words, not mine. But Warner Brothers intervened, wanting a more family-friendly approach, and George Miller had to make some sacrifices and compromises. Which means, you guessed it, this film was a victim of corporate meddling. While what we gotten managed to pull through for the most part, it does explain the drawbacks, such as how the fish shortage felt haphazardly implemented in the final product, and that phoned-in climax and ending. It's a shame when stuff like this suffers from the higher-ups meddling with the product to make it appealing, and I wonder what the final product would have been like if they hadn't. Still, I feel like it could have been so much worse, and the story itself is still adequately written. If they fixed some of the hurdles, it would have helped the film feel complete, but I can take what I can get. With the story covered, let's talk about the characters. One thing that surprised me with James's second take on the film was that there wasn't a single likable or enjoyable character in the original. Really? I mean, if that's how you feel about them, then that's fine. But that seems rather extreme because the characters are actually one of the film's strong suits in my opinion. Sure, not all of them stand out. Like, Norma Jean definitely feels like she was taking a back seat to Memphis. But I do like the moments where we see her relationship with him and their son. Same thing goes for Gloria. Her moments with Mumble can have some charm to it. But then once we get back to the Mystic Beings plotline, she takes a back seat after Mumble pushes her away for her safety. That was a good moment for more character and relationship development. Why would you drop it? Then there's Noah the Elder. Oh boy. I know he's meant to be the character we're supposed to root against, but man, does it feel like he gets away with his bigotry towards the act of dancing way too easily. His role is to be their sort of priest, and throughout the film we see him in his cold eavesdropping on Mumble and his inabilities. But even after losing his patience and having to banish Mumble, only to have his worldview completely shattered, the film all of a sudden says he's changed and is now willing to adapt to dancing. You could say he's abdicating his role by joining the crowd, but I'm surprised no one else turns him down because of his biases that have been proven false. It feels unsatisfying and adds to the already underwhelming conclusion of this movie. But those are really the only characters on the top of my head I can say weren't handled as well as they could have. There's also a couple of side characters who try to add some comedy or serve to move the plot forward and nothing else, but they do serve their moments well. In terms of the more major characters, I did like Memphis's arc of accepting his son's talent and beliefs. If anything, it's what Buck Cluck from Chicken Little should have been. For one, we're shown a reason why he's concerned about Mumble's dancing, because it was the very thing that led to that accident in the first place. He does show a bit of hubris in trying to break Mumble's dancing stigma and find his heart song, and I feel this could be interpreted in a lot of ways. Either as him feeling embarrassed or ashamed of his son's quirks, his fear of what would happen to him in the future, or the growing guilt of how his mistake hurt his own son. You could even see the pain in his tone as he begs and pleads Mumble to change for his sake, and it's proven futile.
Please, son. You can do this. It ain't so hard.
Don't ask me to change, Pa. 'Cause I can't.
Now, it is implied that Norma Jean scolded him for his actions, which is decent off-screen catharsis for those who are against him. Eventually, his spirit has been broken, but it's left in the air which of the two moments caused it. But what matters is that Mumble helps to reignite it by showing him how to dance. It's a nice moment of father-son bonding and is the one aspect the climax got right. So while his actions can be interpreted in a negative light as much as a good one, he at least has solid character development. Also, how can you not perk up at Hugh Jackman going for an Elvis Presley impression?
Well, since my baby left me, I found a new place to dwell. It's down at the end of Lonely Street at Heartbreak Hotel, and I said...
Surprisingly, I found the Amigos to be quite enjoyable. I was worried they would probably get on my nerves, and yeah, they might have gotten a bit overwhelming.
If she leave him now, she'd take away the biggest part of him.
Ooh, don't, baby, please don't.
Please,
go.
guys.
But they mostly had some good moments. Sure, they are racial stereotypes, but they at least serve a good role in the story, accepting Mumble and showing him that there are people out there who are different. Humor-wise, it's hit or miss, but they did get some laughs or chuckles on occasion, especially from Ramon.
Okay, ready.
Okay, ready? I can do this. I got to trick myself. Boy, look at that. What?
Lovelace is also pretty good. I like how he serves as the polar opposite of Noah in using spiritual conversion as an act, and is ultimately punished for it by having his talisman constrict tighter around his throat. So we see some catharsis out of someone who cons others for pleasure. And he's funny! Yeah, I said it. Robin Williams' overacting just slays me, and I can tell he had a lot of fun behind the microphone.
You bring this stranger before me. He doubts my powers. He compares me to a squat. The voices are shrieking in my head. They say, Lovelace, who is this fool? Tell him to go forth and multiply.
However, if there is one character that really stands out and makes this film for me, it's the protagonist, Mumble. Why? Simple. He's a character I can relate with. His interest in dancing and his inability to sing, as well as the way he thinks, have been seen as an allegory for neurodiversity or autism. And I 100% believe that because as someone who's on the spectrum, I can see myself acting very similarly to him. Even before I discovered it, there was something about the way he acted that really spoke to me. At one point, I even almost thought his voice actor Elijah Wood was on the spectrum. But no, he just really sells the character's personality and quirks well, which helps in making him really enjoyable. There's also the little details, from his character design retaining his gray feathers from his infancy. While sources say it was a creative decision to make him stand out among the crowd, I also like to see it as a symbol of how he's a late bloomer on top of adhering to his unique personality, which is genius. There's a lot I learn about this character as I grow older, and he's become one of those protagonists that I could really relate to more in my adult years than I ever would during my childhood. And that's also on top of just how likable he is. Aside from one or maybe two instances where it feels like he might have gotten too far, there's never a single moment where he comes across as hateable. For me, Mumble stands out as one of my favorite aspects of the film. I don't see him as boring. He has a lot of charm, and I'm sure anybody who experiences these thoughts and feelings could relate to him. Which is a good thing, because from what I've heard, his character was originally written to be more cynical and bitter as he becomes more isolated after his parents were killed off. No, I'm not kidding. After learning about this, I'm kind of grateful we didn't get that because it would have risked him being unsympathetic. So yeah, while some of the characters feel underwritten, the ones that aren't are enjoyable in their own rights thanks to their humor, charm, and arcs. Moving on, let's talk about the presentation. Happy Feet is known for being one of the earliest examples of a photorealistic style, which has a rather mixed reception. The issue with photorealism is that it becomes more and more dated as technology evolves. For 2006, I'm sure it was ahead of its time, but how does it fare 2 decades later? Well, in terms of the environments, they've surprisingly held up well. Sure, it might boil down to a bunch of white ice and snowy terrains, but there are still some sets that stand out, especially the underwater and underground sets. Even objects like the ship, the excavator, and the helicopter fooled me into thinking they were done in live action as a kid. There's also special moments in the effects, from snow particles during blizzards to the water. That's some nice looking water. But then there's the characters. I have mixed feelings on the character animation. On the one hand, I do like how they try to blend readable emotions through subtle expressions and movement. And for a large chunk of the film, I could tell how they felt through the way they looked or moved. This isn't like the Lion King remake where they went so far into looking realistic they sacrificed expression while oxymoronically trying to tell an emotionally driven story. But it's also not so over the top that it breaks the realistic immersion the film is trying to accomplish. Sometimes subtle animation choices can make a difference. On the other hand, they still fall victim to uncanny valley territory in some instances. I can still recount moments as a kid where I was a bit off guard by the expressions. I mean, I remember this still being kind of awkward.
What the f*** is that?
I also remember confusing Gloria and Norma Jean together, but nowadays I can tell who's who thanks to some subtle differences. Can't say the same for the other amigos besides Ramon, especially since we don't usually see them individually. There are some characters that are uniquely designed to stand out, like Memphis's beefy bod or Noah's frail hunch, and I already mentioned Mumble retaining the fluff. But for the most part, the character designs are average at best. That said, there is one thing that really stands out in regards to the character animation: the choreography. The film utilizes motion capture for the dancing scenes, with tap dancer Siobhan Glover, I'm sorry if I mispronounced that, leading as Mumble. And I have to say, they did a really great job. I already mentioned the Boogie Wonderland scene, but there's also the scenes where Mumble is by himself as a child dancing to I Wish, which fits. So overall, the visuals are good, with great environments and effects and excellent choreography. And while the character designs and animations besides the dancing are a mixed bag, I wouldn't say they're horrible. Trust me, I've seen worse. With all that said, is there anything else I want to add about my thoughts on this movie? Well, I suppose there's a couple of things. The way I rate movies is mostly based off of entertainment value, meaning the more enjoyment I have watching it, the more likely I am to review it positively. The story and characters for the most part are enough to keep me invested, but are there any other aspects that make the experience enjoyable? Well, I could say this film has a solid soundtrack. This film is a jukebox musical, and I have weird taste when it comes to the usage of licensed music in films, especially in animation. So how does Happy Feet compare? I'd say it was handled fine. I feel some of the song selections fit the tone or mood of each scene, as well as complemented the setting of emperor penguins who find their true love through the song rather than hindering it, at least to me. Sure, your tolerance of these pop songs come down to whether you enjoy listening to them, but the covers range from okay to great, so that kinda makes it easier for me to stomach. Highlights for me are Kiss, Boogie Wonderland, and Somebody to Love. The last two especially stand out for Brittany Murphy's fantastic vocals. Makes me kinda sad she passed away only 3 years later. I'll also never forget the opening bits of the movie, since on top of being visually cool, the music really sent goosebumps down my spine. This is also helped by the instrumentals and score, which complement the singing and fit the atmosphere of each scene. It's actually the same guy who would compose the score for the How to Train Your Dragon trilogy 4 years later. Impressive. In terms of humor, it's decent. I mentioned there can be moments of hit or miss.
2 words. 3 syllables.
What is it? You're dying?
No, wait. Past, your past life.
You're passing gas.
Plus, there's a plethora of innuendos. Call me immature, but I don't mind a bit of adult humor if done well. Like, I'm shocked they got away with Lovelace essentially telling Mumble to go f off. Though speaking of, James made a big deal about this being aggressively sexual when that's really towards the beginning. Sure, there's the occasional mention of having offsprings, but I feel like that's only maybe around 10% of the film? Which would seem like more than any family film, but it's not like it's that excessive. Besides, let's be real, I think there is an early point where kids might learn about the birds and the bees. Anyways, another aspect that works in this film's favor is the voice acting. I already mentioned Wood, Williams, and Murphy. Williams did a great job voicing 2 characters without them sounding too similar. And while I praise Murphy's singing vocals, her voice acting is fine. Yeah, it's nothing to write home about, but I've heard worse. Nicole Kidman, I feel, was on par in terms of singing, but stronger in terms of voicing Norma Jean, with how it takes inspiration from Marilyn Monroe, from what I gathered. Likewise, Hugh Jackman voices Memphis and takes a bit of inspiration from Elvis Presley, so of course I could find that appealing. I also find it kind of funny that Miriam Margolyes is also in this movie, because if I had a nickel for every time she and Jackman were in an animated movie released in fall of 2006, I'd have 2. Coincidence? I think not! Sorry, I didn't want to make the punchline obvious. But that does bring up the voice acting for some of the other characters. Hugo Weaving does a good job making Noah sound authoritarian.
A little self-control, if you please! You bring this disorder, this aberration to the very heart of our community? Have you lost your mind?
Andy LaPaglia is hilarious as the leader Skua, while still posing as intimidating to a little Mumble.
Once, we're gonna do this civilized. Now get in line.
Hey, what's it on your leg?
What, this little thing?
No, don't start him on that.
Shut up. The little flipper boy asked me a perceptive question. A question like that, there's always an answer.
Also, they got Elizabeth Daly to voice Baby Mumble, who's had experience voicing little kid characters. And much like with Woods, she does a great job matching Mumble's personality.
What you doing there, boy?
I'm happy, Pa.
What you doing with your feet?
They're happy too.
And I'd be remiss if I didn't mention this, they even got Steve Irwin in this film. Yes, the Steve Irwin, the crocodile hunter. Before he passed away just 2 months before the film was released, he not only provided the voice of one of the elephant seals.
One day you're a big old whale, next minute, fun food.
But he was also going to have a bigger cameo as this albatross before it was cut from the final film. And man, is it a shame that he's no longer with us, because that last line in that deleted scene really hits hard. As does any final lines from anyone's acting career.
Right. Now that's unusual animal behavior, but I like it. Woo!
So, with everything covered, what's the verdict? In spite of its problems, I still really like this movie. Call it a guilty pleasure if you want, but even putting aside any nostalgia, there's still plenty of aspects about this film that keeps me coming back to it. Whether it's the cast of likable and entertaining characters that have solid arcs and meaningful purposes to the story, excellent voice acting, surprisingly good music with the great song covers and a solid score, decent humor, stunning backgrounds, effects and cinematography, well-established settings and themes, and great choreography. Of course, this film isn't without its faults. There are still some characters I feel were underwritten and any attempts to flesh them out were squandered. The character designs and animation are a mixed bag, with its attempts at trying to blend realism with readable emotions lead to plenty of uncanny valley instances at worst. And the story does have some oversights, like it failing at the show don't tell moniker when it comes to the fish swords aspect, a mostly poorly handled climax that raises a bunch of questions, as well as a cop-out ending that's hard to buy into. And I feel most of these issues with the story are attributed to Warner Brothers choosing to deviate from the original vision and aim for a more family-friendly approach. Despite those and maybe a couple other nitpicks, I can't really bring myself to hate this movie. It's not too special, nor a contender for one of the best animated films, but for what it does well, I think it's absolutely worth the positive reviews it has gotten from critics. But was it worth the Oscar? I don't know. I haven't seen any of Miller's other films, so I can't judge it as such. Who knows, maybe I might get around to checking them out and see how this compares to those. That said, in terms of its animated competition, I do personally prefer Cars, as I feel it had a better handled story and a stronger cast of characters, even if it's nothing special either. I also haven't seen Monster House, but I'm not sure if it would be my kind of thing. There's also some other contenders from 2006, but I can definitely understand why it's garnered its nomination in the first place beyond name recognition. Also, it does sting that this is Miller's only win considering his reputation. As for what I'd rate this film from 1 to 10, I went back and forth on whether to give it a 7 or an 8. In the end, I decided to give this one a 7.5 out of 10. Essentially a middle ground between good and great. I would give the score to something that is overall enjoyable and worth coming back to, even if it does have some glaring issues. I think that perfectly sums up my thoughts on Happy Feet. It has its downsides, but I think the stuff it does well makes up for most of it. I'd say consider checking it out if you haven't already and see which side you fall under. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm gonna go back to Shea Frillis' George Miller ranking to write my comment about how disappointed I am about his placement of the first Happy Feet.
I'm kidding! Who am I? It's a joke! It's a joke!
Okay, in all seriousness, thank you all for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video. And special shoutouts to Shea Frillis Productions for inspiring this review. If you haven't already, which I doubt you haven't, go subscribe to his channel. We might not feel the same about this movie, but he does have good reasons on why he feels this way. And hey, I'll give him this. He's not wrong about the sequel.
Oh, yeah.
I'm out.